Hello, and welcome to Read the World. I'm your host, Derek Main, and I review translated literature. For those who it's not your first time, you'll see I put an actual name to the channel, which I think is smart, that actually says what it is since I review translated literature. I have a title slide, hopefully, that just happened, that took embarrassingly too long and is still very amateur, but that's how we're doing it here. The music for the title slide. So I clipped part of this new album from an electronic musician, very, very talented artist, a friend of mine, goes by the name of Photos Tracks for that particular album. I think there's a lot of names on his work. I've got a link down in my description to the Bandcamp for the album. I encourage you to check it out. It cites Young Moon, the South Korean contemporary author who has some books on deep vellum as an influence. So, it's good. But anyway, welcome back. Today, we're going to review Die My Love by Ariana Harwicz, translated by Sarah Moses and Carolina Orloff, and it's from Charco Press. And the first thing that we have to mention, as with all of Charco Press's titles, is the absolutely beautiful cover and book. These books are so wonderful. The feel of them is great. And look how gorgeous that design is. Charco Press puts out amazing work. So, Die My Love. This is the best book I have read thus far in 2020. It blew me away. I am so excited to talk about it, although mostly I'm just going to read a few passages because this book, well, the plot is about a young woman, a young mother, new mother, who is in the French countryside, kind of alone and lonely. She has a husband. She may have a lover as well, but she is going mad. And it gets increasingly insane as you go through. But so much of the madness, and the narrator is the woman, so you're getting it through her perspective, so much of the madness is relatable, I would say. Even as it gets kind of crazier and crazier, you really feel for her. I mean, she is the protagonist in a way, or I think is the protagonist. And her insanity and her diving into this madness is something that really grabs you and holds you. And I think I get the sense as a man who can never go through this, of sort of the depths of what it means to have something so young, a baby, sort of suck all that need and energy from you. And obviously I have young kids. I saw this, with my wife, but we as men, we only kind of see it. This really puts us right there into that mindset, and with a fascinating character. Really, really good. Now, I have to admit that I did something very foolish. About halfway through, I started to do that English 101 kind of thing where I'm looking for metaphors, right? Because there's so much visual work in this novel, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I kept wondering, what does this represent? And what does that represent? And I think I was going about it all wrong. And I think my enjoyment and the way I really got to engage with the novel in a much more productive way about halfway through was when I really took and understood this writer as someone who is a visual thinker. And it says on the front, a touch of David Lynch from The Guardian. And I think that's really accurate. The author is a playwright and a screenwriter as well. And that really comes through. This author thinks visually. And so I don't know how literal you necessarily need to take so much of it. You really need to understand it as being, I think, intimately inside someone's daydreams, nightmare, and visions, right? As they're awake and sort of half awake, half asleep because of that new mother thing. And these visionary apparitions are just tremendous. And they really add a texture and colors to the story that make it an extremely exciting book, an extremely exciting writer to follow. I After I read the book, I ended up finding on YouTube there's a great interview with the author, one of the translators, Carolina Orloff, who's also half of the co-founder of Charco Press. And it's at Shakespeare and Company in Paris. And they're discussing the work. And one of the interesting things was apparently this was an extremely difficult thing to translate. And they had to really work. Like Carolina Orloff, I guess, comes from the same area in Argentina as Ariana Harwicz, or is familiar with it. I can't remember exactly what it was. But there was a lot of humor, and particularly dark humor, in the original text from the original language that dealt with like colloquialisms and local language that wasn't transferring to English. And so, well, Gidget, my dog, is very excited as well. So that was a really interesting discussion of, you know what it is? I bet that my cat is outside and like that Gidget is just freaking out. The two of them, they do not live harmoniously. Well, anyway, so it was interesting, like when it comes to understanding how translations happen, and particularly how this one happens, because it's never just knowing the language, right? Like knowing what the Spanish word is and here's the English equivalent. You really need to understand the writer and the culture, even down to the local, like where that person comes from. So what references and stuff they're using, particularly in something like this that is so lyrical. It is just bursting with a brutal lyricism that will haunt you and stop you in your tracks. And you really need that translator or translators in this case to grasp that in order for us as English speaking and reading readers to be able to get the full sort of essence of it. So I'm not going to do a lot on the plot or thematic qualities. I really think this is a book that you need to read. And I really think this is a book that you need to engage with personally, intimately, and you will have an experience as you read it. That is an absolute promise. You will have an experience. So what I think is better for this review, I'm going to read 3 quick sections. I could have picked anything from the book because the whole book is filled with this kind of language. But you're going to get a sense of how this book reads, what this voice kind of does. And I think from that, you'll know, is this something that's going to grab you the way that it grabbed me? So the first part we're going to read is from page 56. I don't understand the hidden workings of passion, but it carries me away nonetheless. The curtain drops. Lawyers and the dissolution of the family by mutual consent. Numbers, signatures, laws, paperwork. But that's not going to happen. I want someone who will leave me shaken like the sight of a dying animal. When I'm overcome with lust, I'm a cow with a trapped head. If I burn with desire, I'm a stag walking into a wood the way a bridegroom walks into a church. Wow. Look at those visual illusions. So many of the visual illusions, too, are dealing with animals. So we're in the countryside, some of that, but also the death of animals, as you see with the, she wants someone who will leave her shaken like the sight of a dying animal. And birth, of course, because this is a young woman. And there's a lot of the sexual sort of energy and tension is intertwined with death and blood in a really interesting way. I thought about that. If I burn with desire, I'm a stag walking into a wood the way a bridegroom walks into a church. I thought about that visual a lot. It was my favorite visual, I think, from the whole book. One of the things I'm hoping in the comment section, if you've read this book, drop down your favorite visual, because that's, I think, the place to really delve into this. I think about that bridegroom walking into a church. So there's that anticipation, but that nervousness. It feels like you're crossing into this next plane, and oh wow, and that's how it feels when she is taken with desire. God, that's really good. All right. Next is page 66. I just have written down, good Lord. And this is a really great way to show the way that the mother interacts with the child, with the baby. The baby woke at 7 on the dot, not caring in the slightest that it was Sunday. His body clock never fails. The fields were covered in fog. I might have been at the beach or in the desert for all I knew. It could have been me spacing out or delirium tremens, but no, it was stinking reality. Winter was almost here and all you could see was wood piled high in every porch. I'll spend the rest of the day watching the way the ash floats through the air. I devoted the morning to swearing at the baby. I said all kinds of nasty things to him, to the baby. There's nothing I didn't say. It was one insult after another. My son's got a foul mouth for a mother. I filled him up with dirty words, the poor thing. I hope he doesn't recognize any of them, that he doesn't go around saying fucking hell in front of everyone after this. So that's really funny and gives you a good sense of her with the baby. But there was a line there. I stopped, I closed the book, and I had to take a few seconds. And that is, I'll spend the rest of the day watching the way the ash floats through the air. God, if that doesn't get you the rest of the day watching the ash. 98. This is the last little bit I'll read here. This is when they are taking her to a place to get some treatment, to get some help. Then by they, I mean her husband and her son is in the car as well. This is how the novel begins. The character sitting in the back is being taken somewhere far away. She looks meek, like a schoolgirl almost, with her shorts and her ponytail. But actually, she can scare away dogs and has bullet wounds for eyes. She can actually see the trees sent spinning by the moving car. They overlap and intertwine, merging into one. They're not trees, but a feeling of elation, a nauseous, guilty mouth. In the sky, underground, and everywhere in between, something's missing. The looks from my men are like kicks in the ribs. I hope you could see this and appreciate it and feel it, but I gotta be honest, it's a tough book to review or talk about because, and I feel like I say that lots of books are tough to review and talk about. Maybe they're tough for me. Maybe this isn't my thing, but here's the reason this one is tough. It's an experience and it's a personal experience. And I know all books are like this, but this one maybe even more particularly so because you need to have those visions. You almost are communicating with the dead, even though this author is very much alive and my age as a young woman. But you're communicating with the dead and the ghost of the words on the page, and you're seeing these visions and hallucinations, and there's something about that can only be appreciated through direct experience. So, Die My Love by Ariana Harwicz, translated by Sarah Moses and Carolina Orloff, out from Charco Press. It was a long list for the Man Booker in 2018. What a tremendous knock you down, go through you novel. Absolutely incredible. Next book we're going to do is The Wind That Lays Waste by Selva Almada, translated from the Spanish by Chris Andrews, and this is a Grey Wolf Press. This is the edition I'll be reading from, is the Grey Wolf Press. Thanks, everybody. If you've read Die My Love, I would love, again, like I said, put your favorite visual down below, and if you haven't read it, go out, get it. This is a must recommend. Thanks, everybody, and be good to folks.